Good morning, James with Wisdom Shift. Wanted to come on here this morning and ask you guys a question. Excuse me, do you think we were supposed to have it all together? Hell no! Well, guess what? And if you don't know what type of man you are or what type of man you want to become, then it's a really great idea to take and delve into this. So, courage. Let's talk about courage. Yeah, courage. There is moral courage, which is standing up for what's right. There's physical courage, facing danger, hardships. Emotional courage, which is personal struggles. Loss of vulnerability with resilience. There's intellectual courage, being open to new ideas, new perspectives, and thinking independently. So let me ask you a question. Looking back, where have you been courageous? In your life, just take a minute to look back on that and where have you been courageous in your life, right? It's important to think about these things. Was it a family member? Was it a friend? Or were you courageous for yourself? Think back. Your courage gives you the foundation to move ahead. Courage gives you the momentum to keep moving ahead. Your courage gives you the depth to be who you really are. In the words of Ryan Holiday, who wrote the book Courage is Calling, courage then is the ability to rise above fear, to do what's right, to do what is needed, to do what is true. So, and I want you to throw some things down in the comments, like how, when you think about courage, how it's impacted you. Did you, for instance, for me, one of the things was my older brother standing up for me. I saw the courage that he, I was in grade 7 and he was in grade 9, and one of his friends, who was even bigger than my brother, he beat the living shit out of me in the schoolyard. And then when my brother got home, I got home and then my brother got home, my brother was looking at me and going, I had a black eye and my nose was all swollen up and crusted blood in my nose. And he said, what happened? And I said, well, you know your friend Steven? And he goes, yeah. I said, well, he beat the living crap out of me. Well, the next day, my brother went and stood up for me. He beat the crap out of this Steven. And I mean bad. And for me, that was wow. That's my older brother. He stood up for me. Now, a second time was when I was in grade 9. I was in constant shit in school. And I do mean, I was not a grade A student. I wasn't even a C student. I did not do well in school. And in grade 7, pretty much all I did was fight. I had fights. Back behind one of the churches, there was a little grassy area where everybody that was going to have a fight, that's where we'd go and fight. Well, I got into all kinds of fights in grade 7. Well, by grade 8, I had made up my mind, I really didn't like school at all, so I didn't do well. And by grade 9, I ended up where the math teacher, literally, he absolutely hated my guts. Anyways, I ended up getting into some trouble. We were watching a film in math. Yeah, we're watching a film. And you know how as young guys do, we slouched right down on our desks and we've got our head back. Well, the guy behind me, he took and just before the lights came on, he drove his gum into the back of my head and ground it into my hair. I straightened myself up, sat up, reached back. I turned around and I looked at him, and he had this shit-eating grin on his face. And just as I pulled my arm back, I really didn't even notice. I smoked him right in the nose, and the blood just went poof like this as the lights came on. Well, Mr. Tomko, the math teacher, he just took one look at me, and he looked at the other student's nose with blood spurting out of it, and he came and he literally shaking me, and he shook me. My whole desk completely came out of between the desks, and he threw me on the floor and said, "Get down to the office." I went out the door, shut the door, and I went to turn right to go down to the 2 floors down to the office. And I went, wait a minute, hold on. I wonder if Mr. Stewart is in. Mr. Stewart was the VP. And he was a great guy, and he was super, super, super fair. So I went down and I walked in. Come in. I opened the door, and he took one look at me, and he said, "Shut the door behind you." And he said, "Lock it." No sooner had I locked the door than the door handle twisted, and then we assumed it was Mr. Tomko pounding on the door. And excuse me, he said to me, Mr. Stewart said, "Briefly, tell me what happened." All I did was turn my head around, showed him the gum, and he goes, "Who was it?" So I told him the student, and I told him briefly, really quickly, what happened, and I smoked him in the nose. And he said, "Okay." He said, "Go stand in the corner of my office." He opened the door, and this Mr. Tomko, who is a big, burly guy, well, so was Mr. Stewart. Actually, Mr. Stewart was a Golden Gloves at 16. Anyways, he tried to get around Mr. Stewart, and I won't use the language that Mr. Tomko used that he was going to do to me. At any rate, the point is, I watched as Mr. Stewart stood up for me and had the courage to tell Mr. Tomko, "No, get out of my office. You don't even know what happened." Anyways, years and years later, I say that story because years and years later, and because I ended up not doing so well in school, I plucked up my courage. I was like 24, 23. I ended up going back to the city. I wasn't living in that city, Edmonton, but I went back for some whatever reasons, and I popped into the school, and I went into the office, and I asked if Mr. Stewart was still teaching there, and they said, "Yeah, actually he's retiring at the end of this year." So they said, "Do you know where his office is?" And I said, "Is it up at the far end, 2nd floor?" And they go, "Yeah, it's still there." Anyways, I ended up going up and knocking on his door, and I thanked him. I just said, "I want to thank you. You were one of the few people in my life that had the courage You were one of the few people in my life that had the courage to stand up for me." Wow. So what you want to look at is, for me, that impacted me on such a deep level that I started to dig for the courage in myself to, whenever situations came up that I was maybe either afraid to or, whatever, take on, I would, think back. It was like to my brother having the courage to stand up for me, or Mr. Stewart having the courage to stand up for me. And it's like, I need to stand up for myself. So this whole conversation is about you digging into what in your life, in your past, and I know you all do have this, have had things occur where you stood up and you plucked the courage out of that deep part of yourself, and you were courageous. If this resonates with you, if you find some value in what I'm talking about, post your comments in the comments section. And that's it for today. I really hope you liked this video. Please give me a big thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe below. I will see you in the next video.